outside of the Bible, what is the greatest book ever written in your opinion? Outside of the Bible, huh? If one of you bozos says Twilight, by the way, which I have read, but it's not the greatest book or series ever written. Harry Potter, okay. I'm sure a lot of people would agree with you. Harry Potter, okay. Yeah. Holes, fantastic. Yep, one of the few times where the film adaptation works. It's a very good film too. Yep. For me, this might be a book you've never heard of. It is a book written by a guy named John Bunyan, which we've all heard of, right? He lived in the 17th century, and he wrote a book called Pilgrim's Progress. And if you have never heard of this book and have never read it, you need to, because it is one of the greatest books ever written outside of the Bible. And that's not my words. That is the words of thousands and thousands and thousands of people from all over the world. So in this book, Bunyan details a man's walk through life and all the temptations and troubles that a follower of Jesus will endure. And even though it's written in the 17th century, it's surprisingly easy to follow in 2025. The man's name is Christian, it's very clear what's happening throughout the book based on the names of people and places. The man's name is Christian, who is traveling from the city of destruction, which is the world, and he's on his way to the celestial city, which is what? Heaven. Very good. See, we're already with it. Throughout his journey, he encounters many places that, as the book says, are aptly named. He encounters the Valley of Humiliation at one point, and he goes to the Doubting Castle. All these places that he goes to have to do with different hurdles, obstacles, or things that a Christian has to go through in their life on their way to heaven, the celestial city. And even so many centuries ago, John Bunyan, he describes really well the mental troubles that Christians have to go through. And it's not that he was just coming up with it as he wrote it. He was coming up with it as he lived it. This book is very similar to some of Paul's letters in the New Testament because John Bunyan wrote this book from prison. He was a pastor who was imprisoned for 12 years for preaching the gospel. He was actually told on day one, you can stay here, as long as you want. You can leave whenever you want. But if you leave, you can't preach Jesus anymore. And so he's like, I guess I'm staying. And he stayed there for 12 years. But there were a lot of things in his life that we would consider to be a pretty rough go of things. Just before he went to prison, a few years before, his first wife died, leaving behind 4 kids, and one of those kids was blind. And so there's troubles in just that, just a single father, 4 kids. One of them has, issues with sight. That's tough already. And then not long after that, he gets remarried to another woman. She gets pregnant right before he goes to prison. And while he's in prison, she has an early birth, and the baby is born stillborn. And so John hears about this in prison as a man who lost his wife, the kids lost their mom, and now his wife lost a baby. That is a lot of stuff going on in his life, right? That's a lot of grieving. That's a lot of loss. That's a lot of mental struggles that he has to go through. And throughout all this, he's writing this book. And in these times where, we've experienced loss before, we've experienced maybe not, imprisoned with, 4 kids at home, right? We've never exactly been through that, but we've all experienced loss and grief before. And in those times, it's really easy to ask, where is God at a time like this? Where are you, God? And some of us might even be asking, is he really in control? And so that's what I want to talk about tonight. Is God really in control? Because when you look at this phrase we have on the board here, that God is sovereign, this word sovereign, it means that he is the supreme authority in the universe. He is the supreme authority in the universe. It means he's in control. He ordains, orders, and orchestrates all things for his glory and for the good of his children. Our world, we talked about this with the kids at Kids Camp last week. Our world is filled with chaos. Those kids camps were filled with chaos at times too. But in heaven, there's no panic. Only God's perfect plans. And if God is not sovereign, if he's not in control, we have all the reason in the world to be anxious, do we not? If God is not in control, I need to be worried, right? If there's no divine plan, then we have no hope when we encounter adversity in our life. We'll only see madness, confusion, pain, grief will be multiplied. Actually, everything will be multiplied and amplified if God's not in control. Confusion, anxiety, your fears, they are all multiplied because there's no one in supreme authority in the universe. If nobody's in control, I've got a lot to be worried about. But just to be clear, God's sovereignty doesn't take away our fear and anxiety. Just because he is in control doesn't mean I won't ever be afraid anymore. Doesn't mean I won't ever have anxious times in my life. But it will allow us to, as Paul says in 2 Corinthians, he says that we are sorrowful yet always rejoicing. Because no matter what's going on in my life, God is still in control. So, just how sovereign is God? And if you've been here all the weeks, which everyone has except for you, Josh, we talk for a bit. Like about half of it is I basically explain it, and the second half we have some questions that we answer as a group. So we talk through the whole idea, and then we apply it through like small group questions type things. So just how sovereign is God? Is he sovereign in all things, or is he sovereign in only the good things? What about the hard things? What about my pain? Exactly how in control is he? Right? Yeah. He's the supreme authority in the universe. He's in control of all of it. Psalm 103, verse 19. Psalm 103:19 says, "The Lord has established his throne in the heavens, and his sovereignty rules over all." That word rules there, the Hebrew word there, it's a verb, and it's in the present perfect tense. That's not the part you have to remember. What you need to remember is when it's in that tense, it means that God's rule and his sovereignty never had a beginning, and it will never have an end. It's not like he gained control of the earth at one point and will lose it at one point in the future. No. He rules over all for all time. Empires fall. Dynasties die. Kings can be overthrown, but God is on the throne, and he's not going anywhere. In Isaiah 46, this will be verses 9 and 10, it says, "I am God." Not me, this is God speaking. "I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is no one like me." No one like me. If you're ever talking to someone that calls themselves a Latter-day Saint, this is a great verse to bring up because they would clash with this verse, and this verse goes against a lot of their teaching, where God says, "I am God, and there is no other. I am God, there's no one like me." But what exactly makes God so different from everyone and everything else? We find out in the next verse, in Isaiah 46, verse 10. He says, "Declaring the end from the beginning, and from the ancient times things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish my purpose." You see that? How is he like no other? How is there no one like God? Because no one but him can declare the end from the beginning. No one can accomplish the things that he accomplishes because no one is in the control that he is. And if you've ever wondered what makes God God, it's right here. It is his sovereignty. Because if he's not sovereign, it doesn't matter how much he loves me if he's not in control over everything. Yeah? If he's not sovereign, it doesn't matter how good he is. Him being sovereign is what makes God God. And this means that everything, even right in front of you, and since Josh is here, in a galaxy far, far away, doesn't matter if it's near, far, wherever you are, everything is held firmly in his hand. So, I want to talk about the things that he is sovereign over. I've got 5 things, and after that, I've got 3 big verses that we're going to have questions about, okay? So, 5 things that God is sovereign over, okay? Number 1, he is sovereign over kings and kingdoms. Well, I guess technically 6 then, because there's 2 things in point 1. He is sovereign over kings and kingdoms. In the book of Exodus, we see the story of Moses coming into Egypt and telling Pharaoh, "Let my people go," right? And all throughout that account, when all the 10 plagues are coming upon Egypt, it kept saying that Pharaoh was hardening his heart, right? Pharaoh was hardening his heart, which means he was opposed to what God was doing. But then it got to the 10th plague, and it doesn't say Pharaoh hardened his own heart anymore. What do you know what it says? There you go. It said God hardened Pharaoh's heart. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end. But only God can have that control over a king and a kingdom to accomplish his purpose, to see his people freed from slavery. Only God can do that. Every king that has ever lived on this earth has died. And God knew the day they would die before they were even born. Every kingdom that we've seen throughout history has come to an end, right? But God's kingdom keeps going. God's kingdom is eternal. He rules over kings and kingdoms. All right, secondly, God rules over nature. God rules over nature. One of my favorite books of the Bible is the book of Job. We love talking about Job chapter 1 and chapter 2. Like when we talk about Job, we only talk about the beginning of the book where all the action happens, right? Where Job has everything taken away from him, like in a moment. And we love that, right after it happened, he said, "The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." How could he still worship God even in the midst of all that? Well, did you know that the book keeps going for like 38 more chapters where there's an internal dialogue between him and his friends that goes on, and even a dialogue between him and God trying to make sense of all this? And there's one part in Job 38, this is one of my favorite chapters in all the Bible, where Job is like kind of going against God a little bit. Like, how could you do this? Like, you have the power, you had the power to stop all of this. Why didn't you do that? And in Job 38, God like snaps back at Job a little bit. But he doesn't answer him by just giving him straight sentences. He gives him all these questions. He's like, "Where were you when I formed the earth? Where were you when I told that mountain to stop right there and that wave to stop right there?" Right? If you read all of Job 38, you will see that no lightning strikes this earth, no stars will change positions, no waves will crash, no drop of rain will fall, no lion will hunt, and no hawk flies apart from God's sovereign rule. All of that, he is in control over. And we saw this in one of our stories last week at Kids Camp, where Jesus did all these miracles, but all of a sudden it was amplified when the disciples are in a boat and a storm takes over and they're about to die. Jesus is sleeping. Like that could be a Bible study all in itself with God's sovereignty, because even while they were freaking out, he's having a nap. Why? Because he controls that storm that they're worried about, right? And so he comes up and he tells the wind and the waves to be still, and they listen. How? Because Jesus is God, and God is sovereign, even over nature. Number 3, God is sovereign over time. I had to write that again because I slipped. He is sovereign over time. Psalm 139 verse 16 says, "Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them." He knew all of your days before your first day. That's what that's saying. He knew all of your days before you had even lived one day. He's sovereign over time. And I want to ask, if there was a single moment in your life that God was not sovereign, would you be able to trust him? If there's one millisecond where God lost his sovereign control and then immediately got it back, would he still be worthy of your trust? I don't think so. But the thing about his sovereignty is it has no beginning, it has no end, and it will never disappear. And therefore, God can be trusted. We don't even know what our lives are going to look like tomorrow, right? Like, we might have a schedule, but I have no idea how my drive is going to go to work tomorrow. I know I'm going to work, but I don't know who's going to cut me off. I know somebody's going to cut me off, but I don't know who's going to cut me off. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But the God who holds the future says, don't worry about tomorrow. Because he holds tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and all of time in his sovereign hand. He's sovereign over time. Our fourth one, we're moving right along, you guys. Is that the air going, or is it not? Is that the heat going? Starting to sweat through my shirt. Number 4, God is sovereign over suffering. There is a lot of suffering in the Christian life. Like, every time I have a student give their life to Christ, there's a moment not long after that where they're talking to me or one of our leaders saying, life has gotten crazy ever since I got saved. Like, everything seems to be spiraling. Not a lot of things are going right. My friends won't talk to me anymore. And they start experiencing this suffering. And we're told all the time that we can have peace in chaos. We talked about that last week at the beach. We can have comfort in suffering, but let me tell you, there's no comfort in suffering unless God is sovereign over it. If he doesn't hold the keys even in the dark times of your life, then you can have no comfort in those tough times if he's not in control over it. We have to learn and to trust that God is working out his plan for good. We're going to talk about that verse in just a second. We have to trust that he's working out his plan even when we can't connect the dots. All right? And number 5, I guess we could have done 7 because this one has 2 technically as well. Number 5, God is sovereign over Satan and evil. If we can go back to Job, we spent just a second in there a minute ago. In the first chapter of Job, have you ever thought about we know more about what is happening in that moment than Job does? Like, we read it thousands of years later. We know what's happening there. We know that this is Satan trying to pull Job away from God. Yeah? But Job doesn't know that yet. We know a lot more than he does. And in fact, it's kind of a crazy thing that goes on. Because before all of this happens to Job, there's a scene that takes place in heaven. I think some of us have heard this story before, where it's in the throne room of God, and the devil walks in and starts talking to God. And God's like, how's it going? And Satan's like, no, not much. Just been, roaming around the earth, trying to find someone to steal from you. And God says, have you considered Job? Do you see that? He offered Job up on a platter to the devil. Have you considered Job? Like, there's some days where I'm going through where I think that scene in heaven happened, where the devil's like, I'm just trying to find someone to tempt. And God goes, have you considered Taylor? Like, there's some days where it's like, okay, that scene happened, and now the devil's all over me today. But what we need to know, we can find it in verses 8 through 12 of Job 1. It says, and the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. What's he saying here? He's saying, of course he loves you, God. You've given him everything. He's like the richest dude around. But then the next part is crazy. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. I need you to remember that if you are being tempted, it is only because, one, God allowed it to happen, and two, God gave permission to the devil to tempt you. The devil has to ask permission to tempt you, and God has to grant it. Why? Because God is sovereign over the devil. He's sovereign over it. He has complete control and authority. It's not like, I used to think this as a kid, it's not like God and Satan are in a boxing match duking it out, exchanging blows. Like the devil hits God with a right hook and God has to compose himself for a second, then he comes back and hits the devil. It's not like that at all. Because if they did fight, it would be the most uneven boxing match in all of history. They're not duking it out in the ring because God is sovereign even over the devil. He has authority over him, complete authority. John Piper once put it this way. He said, Satan cannot move without God loosening the leash. And if I can put it in what he just said in modern day terms, the devil isn't on the loose. The devil is on a leash. And who's holding that leash? It's God. And God has complete control and authority over him and all evil. Now let's put all this into the big picture and let's ask, what does this mean for us? Because a lot of people will look at the sovereignty of God and he has complete control and authority and knows everything and can do everything. And we turn that into, does this mean that I'm just a robot with no free will? And it doesn't matter if I want to go to heaven or not. My name's in that book, so I'm going kicking and screaming. Like, Am I just a robot just living out a script that God's already put forward? Like all my words, he already knows what I'm going to say. Like if Carity's going to heaven or hell, God already knows it, and there's nothing I can do to change that. So why would I even try sharing the gospel? If her name is in the book of life, why would I share the gospel with her? She'll find it somehow. There are people that look at the sovereignty of God, and that's how they think it applies to their life. But there are other people who look at it and put it all on us. I have to do the work. It's all me. I have to do all of the work. And so we get on this scale between God's sovereignty and man's responsibility. Okay? I'm going to put that on two sides over here because it's kind of a big debate. It would be a deep dive topic between Calvinism and Arminianism, but I'll save it for another time. I know Merritt wanted to hear all about that. Right? God's sovereignty versus man's responsibility. Is it God or is it man? Like, is it God doing all the work or are we doing the work? And this is kind of a debate when it comes to salvation. Is it God doing everything or is it man that has to do the work? And if somebody were to ask me that question, is it about God's sovereignty or man's responsibility? I would say yes. I would say it's both. Because Jesus does save, right? But we still have to come to him. Yeah? That whosoever believes in him shall not perish and have eternal life. That's the man's responsibility portion of it, right? The first part is God's sovereignty. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only begotten Son. God's sovereignty. And then we come in with our responsibility. God is in control of the work, but he chooses us to use as the workers for his plan and his purpose. God knows when this church will be on Highway 25. He knows to the day when our first service is going to be over there. But we still have a responsibility to be faithful with this church now, do we not? We're not just going to sit back and just wait for it. We are called, we have a responsibility to be faithful with what we have now. We have to remember that God is in control, but in his control, he chooses to use us for his work. Whether times are good or times are bad, his hand is on your life. And he's not struggling to hold on to you. We always see these movies about someone falling off a cliff, but someone catches them at the last second, right? And in every single one of those scenes, there's always that one shot where all you see is the hands and they start doing this, right? They start losing grip. But then they get it back and pull up, and the person's safe 99 times out of 100. That other time was Scar and Mufasa, and yeah. But forget about that. But God's hand is never losing his grip, ever. His control always has a full grip. His authority always has a full grip. He's not struggling to hold on to you. He's got you, and he can handle whatever you're going through because he is in control of whatever you're going through. That old song, he's got the whole world in his hands, right? And if he's got the whole world in his hands, that includes you too.